Get out! Those were my daughter's last words as she drove me into a blizzard during the COVID lockdown after swallowing her husband's lie that I had stolen from them. At 77, I walked into that freezing storm with $43 no phone and nowhere open, thinking of every sacrifice I'd made raising her. 3 hours later, a police officer found me half frozen in the street. She had no idea that night would one day cost them everything. The wind sliced through my jacket like the fabric wasn't even there. My fingers had gone completely numb. Each breath came out in short, frozen puffs that vanished into the darkness before I could even track them. Snow drove into my face, sharp, relentless stinging, like 1,000 tiny needles. I squinted hard against it. It didn't help. The world had been reduced to white and black and cold. So much cold. I had no destination. I only knew I couldn't stop moving. If I stopped, I'd freeze. At 77 years old and 15 to grown, that wasn't a metaphor. It was a fact. My shoes broke through the snow's crust with every step. Each one felt heavier than the one before. My legs were trembling, not from fear, but from exhaustion from the cold, from the sheer shock of it all. I still couldn't make sense of it. An hour ago, I'd been inside warm, safe in the house I'd helped pay for with my daughter, my granddaughter, my family around me. Now I was out here alone in a blizzard over 80,500 I never touched. 1 hour earlier, 8:37 p.m. Where's the money? Gerald Randall stood in the living room, arms crossed, his jaw locked tight. Welcome to his hidden revenge. I'm glad you're here with me today. If stories like this one stay with you long after they end, a like and a subscription mean more than you know. It helps others find their way to this channel too. Before we begin, I'd love to hear from you. When someone you love wrongs you deeply, do you believe forgiveness is something that can truly be earned back? Or do you think some doors once closed stay closed? Drop your answer in the comments. Now, a quick note, some details in this story have been fictionalized for storytelling purposes, and any resemblance to specific real persons or events is coincidental. What matters most is the truth at the heart of it. His voice was low controlled, the kind of calm that told you he was anything but. I looked up from the couch, thrown off. What money? Don't play dumb with me. He moved closer. The 8 in 500. Where is it? My stomach fell. Randall, I told you back in December I lost that money. I don't know what became of it. I've been trying to figure it out. Liar! The word landed like a slap across my face. Diane stood by the stairs, arms wrapped tight around herself. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Her eyes were red like she'd been crying. Diane? I got to my feet, my voice unsteady. What's happening? She didn't answer. Randall pulled out his phone. You want to know what's going on? I'll show you. He thrust the screen toward my face. Text messages from my phone number to a number I'd never seen. I got the money, meet me Monday. I stared at it. I didn't send that. Randall swiped to another screenshot. Then explained this. A photo, my closet, my clothes shoved to the side, and there in a plastic bag on the shelf, $1, $200 in cash. I've never laid eyes on that before. My voice cracked. Randall, I swear. Oh, stop lying. His voice erupted, filling every corner of the house. You stole from me, from your own family. I didn't. You're a thief, Gerald. A liar and a thief. I turned to Diane, desperate. Diane, please. You know me. I would never. She stared at the floor, silent. Diane. My voice broke. Her shoulders trembled. She was crying, but not a word came out. Randall stepped between us. Get out. I blinked. What, you heard me? Get out. You've got 10 minutes. Randall, it's 15 below zero. I don't care. There's a blizzard. I said, get out. His face had gone red, the veins standing out on his neck. I looked past him. At Diane, at my daughter, the girl I'd raised, the woman I'd poured everything into. Diane, I whispered. Please. She turned away. That's when I understood she wasn't going to stop him. I don't remember climbing the stairs. I don't remember grabbing my coat, the thin spring jacket, the only one I could put my hands on. I don't remember lacing my shoes. What I remember is Lily. She darted out of her room as I came down the steps, 5 years old, in her pajamas, her brown curls bouncing. Grandpa. Her voice was small, frightened. Where are you going? I crouched down. My hands were shaking. I have to go for a little while, sweetheart. I know. She clutched my jacket. Don't go. Please don't go. Randall appeared behind her. Lily, come here. No. She held on tighter. Lily now. He pulled her back. She screamed, her little hands reaching for me, grasping at nothing but air. Grandpa. Randall carried her back inside. She was still crying, still calling my name. The door slammed. I heard the lock click. Now, 9:15 p.m. The memory ran on a loop inside my head as I walked. Lily's voice, Diane's silence, Randall's face. The cold had deepened. My teeth chattered so hard I thought they might shatter. My hands were numb. My ears burned. I tried to think, where could I possibly go? Bernard, my old friend Bernard, lived in Evanston, but that was miles from where I stood. And I didn't have my phone. I'd left it on the kitchen counter when Randall shoved those texts in my face. Even if I'd had it, I didn't know Bernard's address from memory. We always just called. There had to be a shelter somewhere, but everything was shut. COVID lockdown, the streets were abandoned, every store, every restaurant dark, locked up tight. Nobody else was out here, just me. I passed a bus stop. The bench was buried under snow. I thought about sitting down just for a moment, just to catch my breath. But I knew if I sat, I wouldn't rise again. So I kept moving. My vision went blurry. The streetlights looked like halos. Everything felt distant, like I was watching myself from somewhere far above. I thought about Evelyn, my wife. She'd been gone 6 years, but in that moment, she felt so near it ached. Gerald. I imagined her saying, "What on earth are you doing out here?" "I don't know, Evelyn. I don't know." "Come home." "I don't have a home anymore." I stumbled. My knee struck the pavement. Pain shot through my leg, though it felt muffled far away. Dull. I pushed myself upright, kept moving. 1 foot, then the other, 1 foot, then the other. I had no idea how long I'd been out there. 10 minutes. 30. Time had come apart. The wind howled. The snow churned. My body felt like it was going dark one piece at a time. And then the thought arrived, this is it. This is how I die. 77 years old, frozen to death on a street corner in Wicker Park. Because my son-in-law needed someone to blame. Because my daughter was too frightened to speak. Because I'd put my trust in the wrong people. I thought about Lily again. Would she remember me, or would Randall tell her I was a thief, a liar? Would she grow up believing her grandpa had walked away from her? "I didn't abandon you, sweetheart. I would never abandon you." My legs buckled. I went down on my knees in the snow. I tried to stand, but my body had stopped taking orders. This is it, I thought again. I closed my eyes. But that night in February 2010, I didn't know what was coming. I didn't know I would survive. I didn't know I would become someone else entirely. I didn't know that in 4 years, I'd be standing on a stage in front of 250 people holding a medal with a new name and a new life. I didn't know Randall would confess. I didn't know Diane would ask for forgiveness. I didn't know Lily would draw me pictures every week even when I couldn't be there with her. I didn't know any of that. All I knew was the cold and the dark and the sound of my own heartbeat slowing. It had all started 6 years earlier in 2004 when Evelyn passed away. We'd been married 42 years. 42 years of Sunday morning pancakes, of fighting over the thermostat, of her pulling the covers off me every single night. 42 years of ordinary, beautiful life. And then she was gone. I was 71 years old, sitting alone in our house in Lincoln Park. The house we'd bought in 1967. The house where we'd raised Diane. The house full of Evelyn's paintings and her flower pots and the lingering scent of her lavender soap. Without her, it felt like a museum, like I was just a visitor wandering through my own life. Diane came by every day that first month. She'd bring groceries, sit with me at the kitchen table, ask if I was eating. I'd tell her yes. She knew I was lying, but she never pushed. "Dad," she said one evening in late 2004, her hand resting on mine, "you can't go on living here alone. This house is too big, too quiet." I looked around. She was right. The walls held nothing but echoes. Every room was full of Evelyn. "What do you suggest?" I asked. She paused. "Randall and I have been talking. We're thinking about finding a bigger place somewhere with more room, and we thought maybe you could come live with us." I blinked. "Diane, I don't want to be a burden." "You're not a burden, Dad. You're family." By early 2005, the decision was made. I sold the house in Lincoln Park. It went for more than I'd expected. Chicago real estate had climbed steadily over the years. When everything was settled, I had just over $200,000. Diane and Randall had been hunting for houses in Wicker Park, a beautiful neighborhood, good schools for Lily, who was 2 years old at the time, all curls and giggles. But the houses were expensive. They'd found one they loved just beyond what they could manage. "Dad, you don't have to do this," Diane said when I made the offer. I handed her the check, $175,000. "Take it," I said. "Buy the house." "Let me help," she cried. Randall shook my hand, his grip firm, his smile open and real. "Thank you, Gerald. We won't forget this." And I believed him. We moved into the Oak Park house in March of 2005. It was beautiful. 3 stories red brick, a small backyard with an oak tree. My room was on the 2nd floor, right next to Lily's. I could hear her laughing through the wall every morning. Those first few years ranked among the happiest of my life. I'd get up early, brew coffee, and sit in the kitchen while the daylight crept in. Diane would come downstairs with Lily on her hip, both of them still in pajamas, and we'd share breakfast together. Randall would join us before heading off to week. He was in finance, always pressed and polished, always moving fast. "Morning, Gerald," he'd say, clapping me on the shoulder. "Sleep well." Like a rock, I'd answer. And it was true. I helped out around the house, fixed the wobbly railing on the back porch, painted Lily's bedroom soft green because she loved the trees, built her a little shelf for her stuffed animals. Diane would smile when she caught me at it. "Dad, you don't have to do all this." "I want to," I'd say, and I meant every word. I spent every afternoon with Lily. We'd stack block towers in the living room, and she'd send them crashing down, shrieking with delight. I'd read her stories at bedtime. Goodnight Moon, Where the Wild Things Are All the Classics. She'd curl up close to me, her tiny hand wrapped around my thumb, and my heart would feel full in a way it hadn't since Evelyn died. "Grandpa," she'd whisper half asleep, "I love you. I love you too, sweetheart." Those words meant everything. Randall was good to me in those early years. He'd ask about my day, invite me to watch football with him, on Sundays trade jokes with me over dinner. We weren't best friends, but we got along. He was Diane's husband, Lily's father, and he treated me with respect. Diane seemed happy. She'd hum while she cooked, laugh at Randall's jokes, reach for his hand when they thought I wasn't watching. I'd think, this is it. This is what I wanted. Family, a home, a purpose. Evelyn would have loved this. She would have loved watching Lily grow. She would have loved the noise, the laughter, the fullness of life in this house. I missed her every day, but I wasn't alone anymore. Then by late 2009, something shifted. It was subtle at first. Small things. Randall started getting home later. He'd walk in at 8 sometimes, 9:00, tie loose, face tight. He'd barely manage a hello before disappearing into his office and pulling the door shut. Diane stopped humming. I'd come across her at the kitchen table, staring at nothing, her tea going cold in front of her. "You okay, honey?" I'd ask. She'd blink, put on a smile. "I'm fine, Dad. Just tired." But she wasn't fine. I could see it in the way her shoulders curved inward, the way she flinched whenever Randall raised his voice, even when it wasn't directed at her. "And Randall." Randall started snapping. "Gerald, did you move my keys?" "No, I haven't touched them." "Well, they're not where I left them." His voice carried an edge I hadn't heard before. Another time, "Did you adjust the thermostat?" I might have nudged it up a degree. "It was getting cold. Don't touch it. We have it set for a reason." I'd nod, apologize, try to keep the peace, but the peace was already broken. Diane and Randall began arguing behind closed doors. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone came through sharp, strained, worn down. Lily noticed too. "Grandpa," she whispered one evening as I tucked her in. "Why is Daddy mad all the time?" "He's just stressed, sweetheart. Work is hard sometimes." "Is he mad at you?" "No, no, no," I lied. "Everything's fine." But I didn't know if that was true. By December 2009, I started keeping my head down. I stopped volunteering to help with things around the house. Stopped suggesting we sit down for dinner together. Stopped asking Diane if she was all right. I told myself it was just a phase. Randall was under pressure at work. Diane was worn out from caring for Lily. Things would turn around. But somewhere underneath all that, I knew something was wrong, and I had no idea how to fix it. By 2009, I'd begun noticing the small things. Randall's temper, Diane's silence. But I kept telling myself it was just stress, just the grind of life. I didn't see the trap being set around me, not yet. The first real sign came in October 2009. I was making coffee on a Tuesday morning when Randall came into the kitchen, his face pinched with irritation. "Gerald, did you move my keys?" I looked up from the pot. "Your keys? No, I haven't touched them." "They're not where I left them." His voice was sharp, impatient. "Where did you leave them on the counter?" "Right here." He pointed to the spot beside the microwave. "I always put them there." I shrugged. "Maybe they slipped off, or Diane moved them." His jaw tightened. "Diane's still in bed. Things don't just move on their own." I helped him search. We found the keys 10 minutes later in his jacket pocket hanging in the hallway closet. Oh, he said flatly. Must have left them in there. No apology, no acknowledgement that I'd helped look. He grabbed the keys and walked out the door. I thought it was odd, but I let it go, not yet alarmed. A week later, it happened again. Randall came home from work, went straight to his office, then came back out 30 seconds later. Gerald, were you in my office? No, I said. Why? Because my papers are out of order. I had them stacked a certain way, and now they're not. I haven't been in there, Randall. He studied me for a long moment, eyes narrowed. Then he exhaled, rubbed his temples. Fine, whatever. But the very next day he came back around. Are you sure you didn't touch anything in my office? I'm sure, because I could have sworn I left that file on the left side of the desk. Now it's on the right. A prickle of unease moved through me. Randall, I haven't touched your things. He didn't answer, just turned and walked away. By mid-October, it had become a constant refrain. Did you change the thermostat? Did you drink my coffee? Did you bring in the mail? Every question felt like a charge being filed, and every time I said no, I could read the disbelief on his face like my word meant nothing. The worst part was that I began second-guessing myself. Did I move those keys? Maybe I'd picked them up without thinking. Maybe I was getting forgetful. I was 77 after all. Evelyn used to joke that I'd lose my own head if it wasn't fastened on. Maybe Randall had a point. Maybe I was slipping. In November, his tone changed in a new way. The four of us were at dinner, me, Diane, Randall, and Lily. I was telling Lily a story about a trip Evelyn and I had taken to Door County years back, and she was giggling full of questions. Randall cut in. Gerald didn't? You already tell that story? I stopped fork halfway up. I don't think so. You did. Last week, word for word. Diane glanced at me uncertain. I don't remember telling it, I said slowly. Randall leaned back, shaking his head. You're 77, Gerald. Maybe your memory is not as sharp as it used to be. The words stung. Lily looked back and forth between us, confused. Grandpa's memory is fine. Lily, finish your dinner. Randall's voice was firm. I didn't tell any more stories that night. By late November, I'd retreated into myself. I'd eat breakfast early before Randall came downstairs. I'd spend my afternoons in my room with a book staying out of everyone's path. I stopped offering to help, stopped reaching out to start conversations. Diane noticed. Dad, are you doing okay? She asked one evening when we were alone in the kitchen. I'm fine, honey. You've been so quiet lately. I forced a smile. Just tired, that's all. She didn't look convinced, but she didn't press. And I didn't tell her the truth, that every time I entered a room, I felt like an intruder, like I was in the way, like I no longer belonged in this house. Then in December, everything changed. I kept my savings in cash, old habit from years back. Evelyn and I always believed in having money on hand for emergencies. After she died, I kept the practice going. I had $60,000 in the bank safe and untouched, but I also kept a little extra at home. $80,500 tucked inside an old Bible on my bookshelf. It was my emergency fund money I'd set aside from my pension over the years. I checked on it once a month just to confirm it was still there. On December 8th, I checked. It was gone. I pulled the Bible from the shelf, fanned through the pages. Nothing. I checked the drawer underneath it, the closet under the bed. Nothing. My heart was hammering. $8,500 doesn't simply vanish. I went downstairs and tried to keep my voice steady. Diane, have you seen my Bible, the old one with the leather cover? She looked up from her laptop. The one from your room. Why, I had some money in it and it's not there. Her eyes went wide. Money. How much? $8,500. Dad, why would you keep that much cash in a Bible? I always have. It was safe. Randall walked in, catching the tail end of it. Wait, you're saying you lost $8,500? I didn't lose it, I said quickly. It's just not where I left it. He crossed his arms. Gerald, did you move it yourself? Maybe you put it somewhere else and forgot. No, I check it every month. It was there last month. Are you sure? I paused. Yes, I'm sure. Randall looked at Diane. Gerald, I don't want to say this, but maybe you're misremembering. You've been forgetting things lately. I haven't forgotten this. Okay. He raised his hands. Okay, we'll keep an eye out. But the way he said it made clear he didn't believe a word. Over the next few weeks, I went through my room piece by piece. Every drawer, every pocket, every book. I even checked spots I knew I'd never used under the mattress, behind the dresser, inside the bathroom cabinet. Nothing. I began to wonder, had I moved it myself, taken it out and forgotten, but I knew I hadn't. I knew it. Still, the doubt gnawed at me. And every time Randall looked my way, I could read the verdict in his eyes. "You're getting old, Gerald. You're losing it." Maybe he was right. Maybe I was. By early January 2010, the atmosphere in that house had become suffocating. Randall barely spoke to me. Diane avoided my eyes. Even Lily seemed quieter, as though she could feel the weight pressing down on all of us. I checked my bank account 3 times that month, just to make certain my $64 was still there. It was untouched. So where had the $8,500 gone, I didn't know. And I was frightened to find out. But I didn't see what was coming. I didn't see the trap Randall was building around me. I didn't see how far I'd already fallen into it. I just kept my head down and waited. By January 2010, Randall stopped pretending. He didn't ask where his keys were anymore, didn't question whether I had moved his things. He simply stopped speaking to me. He'd come into the kitchen each morning, pour his coffee, and walk out without a word. If I said good morning, he'd ignore it. If I asked how work was going, he'd look straight through me like I wasn't in the room. It was worse than anger. It was erasure. In the first week of January, I tried to talk to Diane about it. "Honey, is Randall okay?" "He seems upset." She was folding laundry at the kitchen table, her hands moving on their own, not looking up. "He's just stressed, Dad." "Is it work? I don't know." "Maybe." "Diane." I reached toward her hand. "Talk to me." She pulled back her eyes, cutting to the hallway, checking whether Randall was nearby. "I can't, Dad. Not right now. Can't or won't." Her lips pressed into a tight line. "Please, just don't make things harder." I wanted to push further, but the look on her face stopped me cold. She was scared. By mid-January, Randall had started keeping Lily away from me. One afternoon, I was in the living room with a book when Lily came running in her stuffed rabbit tucked under her arm. "Grandpa want to play blocks." "I'd love to, sweetheart." We'd barely started stacking when Randall appeared in the doorway. "Lily, upstairs, now." She looked up, bewildered. "But Grandpa and I are playing." "Now." His voice was cold. Lily's face crumpled. She got to her feet, slowly clutching her rabbit. "Can I play with Grandpa later?" "No, Lily, go." She walked past him, head down. I heard her small footsteps climbing the stairs, then her door closing. I looked at Randall. She wasn't doing anything wrong. He held my gaze for a long moment. Then he turned and walked away without a single word. After that, every time Lily tried to come near me, Randall would step in, send her to her room, give her a chore, tell her to go outside. She stopped trying after a while, and I stopped fighting it. In mid-January, I started noticing things I shouldn't have. One Tuesday, I was putting Randall's jacket away. He'd left it draped over a chair when a piece of paper slipped out of the pocket. A hotel receipt. Harrah's Joliet. December 18th to 20th, 2009. Total won $847. I stood there staring at it. Randall had told Diane he was at a work conference in December in Indianapolis. Joliet was in Indianapolis. I went back into the jacket. Found another receipt. Caesar's Palace, Las Vegas. November 10th to 12th, 2009. Total $2,230. My stomach turned over. I placed the jacket exactly where I'd found it. Said nothing to anyone, but I started watching more carefully. About a week later, I was in the kitchen when Randall came downstairs with his phone pressed to his ear, his voice tight and low. He didn't notice me. I was standing near the pantry, half behind the open door. I know, Randall said, his voice barely above a murmur. "I just need more time." A pause. "No, I can't get it right now. I'm working on it." I said, "I'm working on it." Another silence. "Look, I'll have the money by March. I promise. Just give me until March." He hung up and stood there, one hand gripping the counter so hard his knuckles went white. Then he turned and saw me. His face went blank. "How long have you been standing there?" "I just came in." I lied. He didn't believe me, but he let it go. He grabbed his keys and walked out. I stayed where I was, heart hammering. "I'll have the money by March." "What money? How much?" That evening I got to the mail before Randall came home. There was a letter addressed to him from a credit card company. I knew I shouldn't open it, but I did. Notice of account delinquency. Outstanding balance $23,456, payment 90 days overdue. $23,000. I felt sick. I tucked the letter back in the envelope, resealed it as well as I could, and left it on the counter. When Randall got home, he spotted it. His jaw went tight. He looked at me. "Did you open this?" "No." He held my gaze for 3 full seconds. Then he took the letter and went upstairs. I didn't see him again that night. By late January, I couldn't hold my silence any longer. One evening, Randall was alone in the living room with a glass of whiskey. Diane and Lily were upstairs. I sat down across from him. Randall, if you need help, I don't. I'm just saying if something's going on. There's nothing going on, Gerald. Randall, I'm not blind. I can see you're under pressure. If it's money. He slammed the glass onto the table. Whiskey sloshed over the edge. Stay out of my business. His voice was a low growl. Dangerous. I raised my hands. I'm only trying to help. I don't need help from you, old man. He leaned forward, eyes hard. You think because you handed us money for this house, you've earned the right to nose into everything you haven't. This is my house, my family, and you're here because we allow it. Don't forget that. The words hit like a fist. I rose slowly. I won't forget. I went to my room and didn't come out until morning. By February 13th, the house felt like a match waiting to be struck. That morning, Randall didn't come down for breakfast. Diane moved through the kitchen like a ghost, silent pale, her eyes red-rimmed. Lily sat at the table, poking at her cereal. Grandpa, she whispered. Yes, sweetheart. Are you okay? I put on a smile. I'm okay. Daddy's really mad. I know. Is he mad at you? I didn't have an answer for that. Diane turned from the sink, her voice clipped. Lily, finish your breakfast. Lily's face fell. She didn't say another word. Around noon, Randall came downstairs. He looked like he hadn't slept. His shirt was wrinkled, his face drawn tight like something inside him was being held back by force. He walked past me without a glance, but I felt it, the hatred, the desperation. Something was about to break. At 4 p.m, Randall locked himself in his office. His voice came through the wall, muffled, but clearly angry. At 6, Diane went upstairs and didn't come back down. At 7:30, I heard her crying in the bathroom. Soft, choked sobs she was trying to smother with a towel. I wanted to knock to ask if she was all right, but I didn't. I just sat in my room and waited. At 8 o'clock, I heard Randall's footsteps on the stairs. Heavy, deliberate. They stopped outside my door. I held my breath. Then they moved on down the stairs, and his voice came up from the living room. Gerald, get down here, now. My chest went tight. I stood up, slowly, walked to the door, opened it, and headed downstairs. By 8:00 p.m., the air in the house pressed down like something physical. Something was coming. I just didn't know its shape yet. That night, February 13th, Dave. 8:37 p.m. was the night everything came apart. Randall called me downstairs, accused me of stealing the $8,500 I'd lost. Back in December, showed me text messages I'd never written from my phone to a number I didn't know, showed me a photo of 1-200 hidden away in my closet, money I had never seen before. You're a thief, he said. I tried to explain, tried to defend myself. Diane stood against the wall, silent tears running down her face. She wouldn't look at me, wouldn't speak. Get out, Randall said. You have 10 minutes. I looked at him, then at Diane. At the home I had believed was mine, and I knew there was nothing I could say that would change his mind. I climbed the stairs slowly, each step heavier than the one before. My room, the room I'd lived in for nearly 5 years, felt different, smaller, like it had already stopped belonging to me. I stood in the doorway and looked around the bed Diane and I had chosen together at a furniture store in Evanston. The bookshelf I'd built with Lily one Saturday afternoon, her tiny hands steadying the nails while I hammered. The curtains Evelyn had sewn years ago, pale green with ivory trim, that I'd carried from our old house because they kept her close. This had never really been home. I see that now. I pulled open the closet door. The only jacket within reach was a thin navy spring thing, fine for a mild morning, useless in a February blizzard. My heavy coat was down in the hall closet. Getting it meant going back to Randall. That wasn't happening. Not tonight. Not ever again. I yanked the jacket free. On the dresser sat my wallet. I flipped it open. $43. Diane's college graduation photo. My driver's license. A library card gathering dust. I shoved the wallet into my pocket. Beside it, a framed picture of Evelyn. She was on a beach at Mackinac Island the last summer, before the illness came for her. The wind had her hair going every direction, silver strands lit up by the sun. That smile, God, that smile. It could warm a room from across the house. I eased the photo out of the frame and tucked it into my inside breast pocket flat against my heart. Forgive me, Evelyn, I said softly. I'm so sorry. My eyes moved around the room one final time. The books, the clothes, the wooden box where I'd kept Evelyn's wedding ring. Leave it. Carrying things would only slow me down. And some foolish corner of my brain was still whispering that this wasn't permanent, that Randall would settle himself, that Diane would find her spine, that I'd walk back through that door in a day or two. I know better now, but I couldn't see it then. I went downstairs. Randall stood planted at the front door, arms folded, jaw set like concrete. Diane had vanished upstairs with Lily, I assumed. He said nothing, just pinned me with that stare. I held my ground a few feet back. Randall? I never touched that money. I don't care. I'm giving you the truth. And I'm giving you the door. Use it. I looked at that man. Really looked. The man Diane had chosen, the man I'd handed $175,000 so his family could have a house. There was nothing behind his eyes. No flicker of guilt. No second thought. Nothing but cold, hard certainty. Where exactly am I supposed to go? I kept my voice level. That's your problem. It's 15 below zero. There's a blizzard out there. Thought about that before you stole from me. Nothing I could say would move him. He'd already written the ending. I started toward the door. Then I heard it. Grandpa. Lily? Scared and small. I stopped and turned. There she was at the top of the stairs, pink pajamas, clutching Mr. Buttons so hard her knuckles must have ached. Her eyes were puffy, ringed red. Where are you going? Something seized up in my chest. I have to step out for a bit, sweetheart. Why, what do you tell a 5-year-old? I have to go right now. You're coming back though, right? Lord, I wanted to promise her. I wanted to say tomorrow morning, I'll be at the kitchen table, coffee ready, waiting for you. But the words wouldn't come out. I don't know, Lily. That's when her face broke open. No, no, Grandpa. Please, please don't go. She came barreling down those stairs, feet hammering every step, and buried herself against me, arms clamped around my middle. Stay. Please stay. I got down on my knees, trembling hands and all, and cupped her face, wet cheeks, soaked with tears. I love you, Lily, more than you'll ever know. Then don't go. I have to. But why? I couldn't get the words out. Couldn't lay the truth on a child. Randall reached past me and grabbed her arm. Lily, let go. No. Her grip tightened. Lily now. He pulled her back. She screamed, reaching. Grandpa! Grandpa! Her fingers dragged across my jacket and lost their hold. Randall scooped her up, and she thrashed arms, straining toward me, crying too hard to breathe. Come back. Please come back. Diane came out of the kitchen. She took Lily from Randall, pressed her daughter's face to her shoulder, turned away from me. Shh, shh, baby. It's all right. It was not all right. Lily kept sobbing, kept calling my name, and Diane, my own daughter, never once lifted her eyes to mine. Randall swung the front door open. The cold hit like a wall. Immediate. Savage. Out. One last look. Lily's face. Diane's turned away profile. The house I'd poured myself into. I walked out. The door closed behind me, and I heard the deadbolt snap. Click. I stood on the front step in the dark, breath rising in white puffs. From inside, Lily's crying still came through the walls, muffled but clear enough to cut right through me. Grandpa. Grandpa. Part of me wanted to pound on that door until my hands gave out. I didn't. I stood and I waited, and then the lights began going off one at a time. Living room, hallway, kitchen, dark. They'd closed the book on me. I faced the street. Empty. Quiet except for the wind working itself into a howl. Snow drove sideways through the glow of the streetlights, and between those pools of pale light, there was nothing but blackness. I pulled the thin jacket around me, pointless really, but habit. $43 in my wallet, Evelyn's photo over my heart, and not a single door in the world open to me. I walked. Away from the house, away from Diane, away from Lily. No plan, no destination, just the knowledge that I couldn't stand frozen on that step forever. By 9:15, I was deep in the blizzard, 77 years old. Nothing on my back worth mentioning. No idea what came next. The hour and 15 minutes that followed were the worst of my life. Every building I passed was sealed shut. Every light was dead. The cold wasn't just uncomfortable, it was methodical. It worked through you layer by layer, dismantling you until the memory of being warm seemed like something you'd imagined. 3 blocks from Diane's house, I spotted a CVS, its red sign bleeding faintly through the snow. I pushed toward it, legs already shaking breath, coming in short, painful gasps. I grabbed the door handle. Locked. A paper sign read, "Closed COVID-19 curfew, 8:00 p.m. to 6:00 a.m." I stood blinking at it. Past 9:00 now, an hour too late. I put my face to the glass anyway and looked in. Dark aisles, empty, no movement anywhere. I knocked. "Hello!" My voice came out weak, hoarse. "Anybody in there?" Nothing came back. I knocked harder. "Please, I just need—" I stepped away. Hands going numb, chest tight. I kept moving. Next block there was a diner, or had been once. Chairs stacked on tables, windows black. A handwritten sign, temporarily closed. Temporarily. I wondered how many places hung that sign in 2009, thinking they'd be back open in a month. How many never unlocked their doors again? I tried it anyway. Locked. A bank? Locked. A coffee place? Locked. A shop selling winter scarves, the cruelest joke the night had to offer. Locked. Every last one. COVID had emptied the world out, and I was stranded on the outside of it. 6 blocks in my hands had gone completely. I kept curling my fingers, trying to wake them up. Nothing. Stiff, unresponsive, like they belonged to someone else. My ears were burning the way only deep cold makes them burn. The wind found them no matter how high I yanked my collar. It made no difference. My legs had started shaking so badly that walking straight took real concentration. Every stride felt like dragging something heavy. My knees wanted to fold under me at every step. "Keep moving," I said out loud to no one. "Stop, and you're done." But exhaustion was settling into my bones. I came to a bus stop, plastic roof, 3 side panels, and dropped onto the bench. It was barely shelter, but it broke the wind slightly. My whole frame was shuddering. The cold had gotten through everything, jacket, shirt, skin, and taken up residence. My teeth were rattling so hard I half expected one to crack. I tried to think straight. Bernard. My old friend Bernard was over in Evanston, but that might as well have been the other side of the world on foot, and I couldn't recall his street address to save my life. I'd always phoned ahead, and my phone was sitting on Randall's kitchen counter, right where I'd left it when he shoved those fake texts in my face. A shelter. Surely there was a shelter somewhere in this city. But I didn't know where, and I wasn't sure my legs could carry me there, even if I did. 6 blocks already behind me, and my legs were ready to quit. Maybe just stay here, I thought. Wait the cold out. But a voice in my head. Evelyn's voice said, "Gerald, if you sit too long, you won't get back up." She was right. She was always right. I thought about Evelyn, 42 years of marriage. I thought about the first time I laid eyes on her. I was 29, working construction dust, and sweat caked all over me. She was at a diner with her girlfriends, laughing at something one of them had said. When she glanced up and caught me staring, she didn't flinch or look away. She smiled, and I was done. I thought about our wedding, small, just family, and a handful of friends. Evelyn wore a simple white dress she'd found at a thrift store, said she didn't need anything fancy. All she needed was me. I thought about the night Diane came into the world, how Evelyn held her tears running down her face, whispering, "We made this. We made her." I thought about Sunday morning's pancakes. Evelyn always scorched the first batch, and I'd eat them anyway, and she'd laugh and call me a terrible liar. I thought about the thermostat, wore how she always wanted it at 72, and I'd turn it down to 67 when she wasn't looking, and she'd push it back up, and we'd go back and forth until one of us gave in. I thought about the last thing she ever said to me. We were in the hospital. She'd been sick for 6 months. The doctors had run out of options. She took my hand. "Gerald," she whispered, "don't be alone. Promise me you won't be alone." I promised. And then she closed her eyes. I broke that promise. There I sat on that bench in the freezing cold, not a soul around, nowhere in the world to go. I was alone, completely, utterly alone. "I'm sorry, Evelyn." I breathed the words into the wind. I tried. I really tried. I thought about Lily, that laugh of hers, high and bright and contagious. The way she'd come flying toward me every single morning, curls bouncing, hollering, "Grandpa, Grandpa!" The way she'd grip my hand at every crosswalk, those little fingers locked tight around mine, trusting me to keep her from harm. The way she'd settle into my lap while I read to her "Good Night, Moon," where the wild things are. She had every word memorized, could recite them all by heart, but she still wanted me to read them again and again. Again, Grandpa, again. And I always did. Because there was nothing on this earth I'd love more than making her happy. Where was she right now? Was she in bed? Was she crying? Did she believe I'd abandoned her? "I didn't abandon you, sweetheart. I swore to myself I never would. My vision started going soft. The streetlights looked hazy distant, like I was watching them through murky water. My body felt impossibly heavy. I tried to stand, but my legs had stopped taking orders. Get up, I told myself. Get up. Move. But I couldn't do it. The cold had worked its way inside me into my chest, into my bones. And I was so tired. Maybe if I shut my eyes for just a moment. No. Evelyn's voice again, sharper now. Gerald, don't you dare. I forced my eyes open, shoved myself up off that bench. My legs nearly buckled, but I caught the edge of the shelter and held on. Move. Just move. One foot forward, then the other. One step, then one more. The world tilted sideways. I stumbled, and then I was down face first in the snow. I tried to push myself up. My arms had nothing left. This is it, I thought. This is how it ends. 77 years old, freezing on a sidewalk in Wicker Park. Because my son-in-law set me up. Because my daughter wouldn't say a word. Because I had nowhere left to turn. I closed my eyes. And then light. Bright. Blinding. I turned my head. Headlights. A vehicle pushing through the blizzard. The police cruiser's headlights cut through the storm like twin beams of hope. I heard the engine first, then the crunch of tires pressing through snow, then the lights bright, blinding, impossible to look at. The car stopped. A door swung open and a man stepped out. Officer Curtis Haddon was 44, broad-shouldered, his face worn by Chicago winters and long nights on patrol. He had on a heavy navy jacket with Chicago police across the back, a radio clipped to his shoulder, and the look of someone who'd seen enough that very little rattled him anymore. But when he spotted me lying face down in the snow, barely moving, something shifted in his face. Sir? He dropped to a knee, a gloved hand closing around my shoulder. Sir, can you hear me? I tried to answer. My lips moved. No sound came. He rolled me onto my back and shone a flashlight into my face. I squinted my vision, swimming, my whole body shaking beyond my control. Jesus, he muttered, then louder. Sir, stay with me? Can you tell me your name? G. Gerald. The word barely scraped out of my throat. Okay, Gerald, I'm Officer Haddon. I'm going to help you, but you have to stay awake. All right, I tried to nod. I couldn't tell if it worked. Curtis spoke into his radio. Dispatch Unit 12. Male mid to late 70s found unresponsive at Harvard and Beacon. Suspected hypothermia. Requesting immediate medical assistance. Static crackled back. Unit 12. Ambulance delayed due to weather. ETA 20 to 30 minutes. Curtis's jaw went tight. Copy. He looked back at me. Gerald, I'm getting you into my car. We need to warm you up. He didn't wait for a reply. He lifted me like I was nothing, carried me straight to the cruiser. The heat inside hit me like walking into a furnace. I gasped, my body convulsing. I know Curtis said, his voice steady. It's going to hurt, but you need this. He cranked the heat all the way up and wrapped me in a silver emergency blanket, crinkly and loud. Then he turned to look at me. Gerald, I need to ask you some questions. Can you answer? I nodded. How long were you out there? An hour, maybe more. Where were you headed? I don't know. His eyes sharpened. Where did you start from? I hesitated. Gerald, he said, gentle but firm. Are you in danger? Did someone do this to you? I closed my eyes, and I told him everything. About Evelyn, about moving in with Diane and Randall, about the $175,000 I'd handed over for the house, about Randall's change, the gaslighting, the missing $8,500, the fake texts, the cash they'd planted in my closet. About that night, the accusation Diane silenced Lily, screaming as they pulled her away. About being shoved out into a blizzard at 77 years old with nowhere to go. By the time I finished, I had no voice left. Curtis sat quiet. Then he said, That's elder abuse. I blinked. What? And if he framed you and put you out, knowing you could die out there, he went on, that's attempted manslaughter. I don't want to press charges, I whispered. I just want... Gerald Curtis cut in. This isn't only about what you want. What he did is a crime. He's my daughter's husband. That doesn't make it something I can overlook. I stared down at my hands. It doesn't, I said, but I can't stand the thought of hurting Diane. Curtis exhaled slowly. Your daughter let him throw you into a blizzard. I don't know what drove her to that. Fear, maybe. But she let it happen. The weight of that settled deep in my chest. Curtis reached into the console and pulled out a thermos. Drink, he said. Hot water. It'll help. I sipped carefully. The warmth moved through my chest and into my stomach. It was the best thing I'd ever tasted. Thank you, I whispered. Curtis paused, then said, I have a father. 75, lives in Rockford. I looked at him. Stubborn as they come. Says he doesn't want to be a burden. I check on him every week. His voice went quieter. If somebody did this to him, I wouldn't let it go. He met my eyes. You remind me of him. My throat tightened. You don't deserve this, he said. You deserve safety, warmth, dignity. Snow hammered the windows while we waited. Then red lights appeared behind us. The ambulance had made it. 2 paramedics came out at a run. This is Gerald Curtis, told them. 77 hypothermia, mild frostbite, stable for now. A woman knelt down beside me. Hi, Gerald. I'm Celine. We've got you. They moved me onto a stretcher, bundled me in heated blankets, and loaded me into the back of the ambulance. Curtis stood in the open doorway. You're going to be okay, he said. I want to believe you, I answered. Thank you, I said, for stopping. He gripped my shoulder. I'm glad I did. The doors swung shut. The ambulance rolled away. I closed my eyes and let the warmth pull me under. I woke up 3 days later. The first thing I registered was the beeping, steady, relentless, a heart monitor. The second was the light white fluorescent, the unmistakable light of a hospital room. The third was warmth, real warmth, the kind that tells you that you're still here. I opened my eyes. A woman in blue scrubs stood at my bedside going over a chart. Dark hair, pulled back glasses on her nose. She glanced up. Welcome back, Gerald. Her voice was calm and kind. I tried to speak, but my throat burned. I coughed instead. She poured water into a plastic cup and held it out. Small sips. I obeyed. Where am I, Stroger Hospital? What I was about to discover about how close I truly came to dying, and exactly why I ended up out in that blizzard at all, would reshape everything I thought I knew about the people I called family. Before we get there, I want to ask you if you found out someone had been quietly working to destroy you. Would you confront them the moment you knew, or would you wait and let the truth find its own moment? You were admitted on February 14th. Today is the 17th. 3 days gone. I'm Dr. Felicity Drummond. You came in with stage 2 hypothermia, mild frostbite on your ears and fingers, and a laceration on your forehead that required 8 stitches. I touched the bandage above my eyebrow. You fell face first, she said gently. Officer Haddon found you just in time, 5 minutes later. She didn't finish. She didn't need to. The days that followed ran together. Nurses came in every few hours to check my vitals, temperature, blood pressure, oxygen. The frostbite felt anything but mild, like sandpaper dragged across raw skin. Dr. Drummond said I was lucky. No permanent damage. My fingers would heal. My ears would heal. The stitches would come out in 10 days. You're stronger than you look, she told me. I didn't feel strong. I felt hollowed out. Curtis came every single day. The first visit he brought a turkey sandwich and orange juice. Hospital food's terrible, he said. Thank you, I whispered. He pulled up a chair. I filed a report on what happened. My chest squeezed tight. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. Elder abuse, fraud, possibly attempted manslaughter. What happens now? That depends. Do you want to press charges? I didn't know. I need time. Curtis nodded. If you don't do something, he'll do it again. Maybe not to you, but to someone. He was right. Even so, the thought of dragging Diane through a courtroom, of pulling Lily into all of it, I couldn't. Not yet. On February 16th, Curtis came back and leaned in close. Gerald, do you have anywhere to go? I thought about Lincoln Park, sold years ago. Diane's house, the door slamming, the lock turning. Old friends I couldn't bear to burden. No, I said quietly, figured Curtis replied. Let me make some calls. 2 days on, he came back with a woman in her early 60s. Silver hair, warm eyes, and easy steadiness about her. Gerald, this is Dr. Claudine Overbeck, director of Harbor Light. She shook my hand. Firm, steady. What's Harbor Light? I asked. A nonprofit housing and support for older adults facing homelessness. 30 beds full-time, staff a real community. You want to give me a place to stay if you're willing to accept it. I don't want charity. She smiled gently. This isn't charity. It's a chance to rebuild. We offer job training, mental health support, and connection. A future. Why me? Because you deserve a second chance. You were thrown out by people who were supposed to protect you. That isn't your shame to carry. Her words sank deep. Curtis nodded. It's safe, and she's the real deal. How much does it cost? I asked. Nothing. Just participation. I thought about shelters, cramped rooms, the street. When can I go? As soon as you're cleared, on February 21st at 10 in the morning, I was discharged. Curtis drove me. Harbor Light sat in Wicker Park tucked between brownstones and a small park. 3 stories, red brick green door. It looked like a home. Dr. Overbeck met us at the entrance. Welcome, Gerald. Inside the walls were painted soft yellow. Plants filled the windowsills. Framed photos of smiling residents lined the hallways. 30 rooms, she said, most filled. She stopped at a door marked Room 9. This is yours. Inside a single bed with a blue comforter, a dresser, a desk, a window looking out over the park. It wasn't much, but it was mine. That afternoon I met Arlene Croft, mid-50s curly red hair, a warm smile. You must be Gerald. Room 8. We shook hands. How is it here? I asked. She thought about it. It's safe. No judgment. Dinner's the best part. That evening I sat at a long table with 8 others. They wanted to know my story. I gave them the short version. They listened, then shared their own. Divorce, illness, eviction, abuse, bad luck. We'd each been broken in different ways, but we'd all landed here. Later, lying in bed, I listened to the quiet hum of the building. Dr. Overbeck's words came back to me. Welcome home. But I didn't feel like Gerald anymore. Gerald had walked into a blizzard alone. That man had been left for dead out there on the snow. And maybe that was all right. Maybe it was time to become someone else, someone who could start over. I closed my eyes. For the first time in weeks, I felt the faint pull of possibility. That afternoon, my first full day at Harbor Light, Dr. Claudine asked me to come by her office. Just some paperwork, she said. Her office was small bookshelves along one wall, a desk buried under files, a window facing the park. She sat across from me, a registration form lying between us. Full legal name, Gerald Leonard Whitmore. She wrote it down, then paused. What would you like us to call you? I frowned. What do you mean? Some residents go by nicknames, middle names, whatever feels right. This is a fresh start. You get to decide. I sat back. Gerald was the man who'd been thrown out, who'd been framed, who'd watched everything crumble. Gerald was the past. But Leonard was my middle name, my mother's choice. Named for her own father, a man I'd never met, but who she always said was strong, kind, and stubborn in the best possible ways. Leonard felt different, clean. Leonard, I said. Call me Leonard Whitmore. Claudine smiled and crossed out Gerald. Okay, Leonard, let's start fresh. The first week was hard. Not because Harbor Light was a bad place. It was because I no longer knew how to simply exist. For 5 years, I'd had purpose fixing things, being there for Lily. Now there was nothing but time, and time meant thinking, and thinking was the most dangerous thing I could do. I thought about Lily's face that night, Diane's silence, Randall's hollow stare. I thought about Evelyn, about the promise I'd made, don't be alone, and how completely I'd broken it. I thought about the $8,500, the texts I never sent, the cash I never planted. How had I not seen it coming? On the 3rd day, Arlene knocked on my door. You coming to lunch? I was on my bed staring at the wall. I'm not hungry. Uh-huh. She leaned in the doorway. Look, Leonard, the first week is rough. You're somewhere new. You don't know a soul and your mind won't give you a moment's peace. Yeah, I nodded. Thought so. Come on. She didn't wait, just turned and walked. I got up and followed. At lunch, Arlene told me her story. 23 years married, she said. Marketing manager. Nice apartment up in Evanston. Thought I had everything figured out. And then, husband walked out for his assistant. 28 years old. Cliché, right? She gave a short, bitter laugh. Divorce dragged on 2 years. Burned through everything on lawyers. Lost the apartment. Got laid off during COVID. Slept in my car for 3 months before I found this place. I stared at her. 3 months? Yep, and I'm still here. She pointed her fork at me. You're not the only one who lost it all, Leonard. Every person at this table did. But we're still showing up. That counts for something. I looked around. 10 other residents, each carrying a story like ours. You're right, I said quietly. By the 2nd week, Dr. Claudine suggested I speak with someone. Her name's Dr. Nadell Quarry. She's our therapist. Just give it a shot. Dr. Nadell's office was on the 2nd floor. Small, comfortable 2 chairs angled toward each other. She was in her early 50s, short brown hair, eyes that had a way of seeing past what you meant to show. So, Leonard, she said, what do you want? What do I want? Yes, from life, from being here, from whatever comes next. I had no answer. I don't want to disappear, I finally said. Like I never left a mark, like everything raising Diane, helping Randall, being there for Lily, counted for nothing. You're 77 years old, Nadell said. You lived a full life, married 42 years, raised a daughter, worked hard, built things. You didn't disappear. You were betrayed. The word landed like a stone. I trusted them, I said, my voice cracking. How could I have been so blind? Because you're a decent person. Decent people extend that same decency to everyone around them. She leaned forward. But you don't have to let their betrayal write the rest of your story. You have knowledge, experience, skills. Use them. I looked down at my hands. 77 years old. Still strong. What if it's too late? Nadell smiled. You're here, aren't you? You survived. That's not nothing. That's everything. The third week I started looking for ways to be useful. The dining table had a wobbly leg. I fixed it. One resident, Ida, had a jewelry box from her grandmother. The hinge snapped clean off. I fixed that too. Word got around. Before long, people were coming to me with things. A loose drawer, a squeaky door, a bookshelf that listed to one side. I said yes to all of it. It felt good, like I had weight again, like I mattered. Harbor Light ran a small child care program. On Thursdays, I started reading to the kids. Where the Wild Things or Goodnight Moon, the same books I'd read to Lily over and over on the couch back home. At first it hurt. Every page brought her face back. But then a little boy, maybe 4 years old, looked up at me and said, "Can you read it again, Mr. Leonard?" And I did, because he asked, because I still could. I also started helping residents put together resumes. Most hadn't worked in years, didn't know the format, didn't know what to say about themselves. I'd sit beside them at the dining table, and we'd work through it together. What did you do before they'd tell me? What I'd point out to them was, this keeping a household, raising children, pushing through hard times, those are genuine competencies, worth putting on a page. Before the month closed, 3 people had interviews. 1 got a job offer. Early March, Dr. Claudine summoned me back to her office. "Leonard, I want to propose something." A community health worker position had opened up part-time, $17 an hour, guiding residents through the healthcare maze, mass health paperwork, getting to appointments. I stared at her. "Claudine, I'm 77, no formal training." "You don't need it," she said. "What you carry is lived experience, and that outweighs a certificate." She leaned in. "You've repaired half the furniture under this roof, sat with every child, here walked 4 people through building a resume. You actually give a damn. That's the whole qualification." I sat with it for 2 days. Then I said yes. First day on the job, I helped a woman named Consuelo enroll in Mass Health. 62 years old, diabetic, 3 years without a doctor's visit. We went through the application together at my desk, field by field. When it was done, she broke down. "Thank you," she whispered. Nothing came to me to say. I just nodded. The weeks that followed, a dozen residents helped services, connected appointments, booked rides, arranged. Not exactly thrilling work, but it meant something. For the first time since February, I felt like I occupied a purpose. April arrived with a rhythm attached to it. Up at 6, breakfast at 7, work 8 to 2, reading to children on Thursdays, dinner at 6, then a walk. I had 4 walls to call mine, a role, a community, a name, Leonard Whitmore. Gerald was finished with. Gerald was the one the blizzard had taken. Leonard was still standing. Whether that man could build something real, that was the question. Maybe was enough to keep going. 2 weeks into the new role, a detective showed up at Harbor Light. Calvin Reeves, somewhere in his mid-40s, gray suit, eyes that had absorbed more than their share. He requested a private conversation. Dr. Claudine offered her office. Detective Reeve opened his notebook. "Mr. Whitmore, Leonard Whitmore. I've been looking into what took place on February 13th. My chest locked up. I don't want to press charges. I understand that," he said. "But something has come to light." He turned through pages. A co-worker of Randall Fenn's, a man named Gerald Callahan, came to us voluntarily. He said Randall is carrying $77,000 in gambling debt. I held very still. We pulled the texts, the ones supposedly sent from your phone. All fabricated. Randall constructed every one. Then a pause before the next part. In January of this year, he quietly secured a $400,000 life insurance policy on you, listing himself as the sole beneficiary. Every bit of warmth drained out of me. 1 month before he put you out, the door said, "Detective Reeve." Randall gave a statement, his words. "I thought he'd die out there. I needed the money." "That's premeditation," Reeve said. "Fraud, elder abuse, attempted manslaughter all filed. 30 years on the table. I had no words. 30 years. The trial came and went without me. Curtis said he'd drive me there. Dr. Claudine offered to sit beside me in the gallery, but I couldn't place myself in that courtroom, couldn't face, Randall couldn't absorb seeing Diane. Not then. So Harbor Light held me. Work held me. The Thursday children held me. And I pressed down the knowledge as hard as I could that my son-in-law had weighed my life against $400,000 and made his choice. In May, Dr. Claudine called me in. "Leonard, I'm moving you up senior community health worker, $20 an hour." "Claudine," I started, "you've earned every cent of it. I accept it." Summer came and my thinking expanded. Case by case wasn't going to dent what was actually needed. One night, I spread papers across my desk and began drafting a proposal, a program built specifically for women over 50 facing homelessness. Not just a roof, not just job prep. A full architecture, mental health services, healthcare navigation, childcare, resume, building interview, coaching, financial literacy. I named it Silver Bridges because the mission wasn't only survival, it was crossing somewhere new. 3 weeks of work. I handed the draft to Dr. Claudine and watched her read it without lifting her head. When she finally looked up, her eyes were wet. "Leonard, this is extraordinary. You think it could actually work?" "I think it could alter lives," she said. Silver Bridges launched in October of 2010. Year 1, 65 women. Jobs secured, housing, found family ties, repaired. One woman, Winifred, 58, walked out with an office manager title at a law firm. She was tearful when she broke the news to me. 6 years since real employment, she'd convinced herself she was done. I shook my head. "Winifred, you did the work. I just helped you believe it was still possible." By January of 2012, the story had traveled. The Chicago Tribune published a feature, Leonard Whitmore, 78 turns tragedy into purpose. I had no appetite for the interview, but Dr. Claudine pressed me. "People need to know your story," she said. "It's proof that there's a way through." So I talked to the Blizzard, Randall Harbor, Light, Silver Bridges, all of it. The piece ran, and the donations followed. $50,000 inside the first week. Dr. Claudine gathered us together. "Leonard, we can reach further. Rockford, Peoria, Aurora, Evanston. We can go statewide." We did. End of 2012, 4 cities, 140 more women, served 205 total. March of 2013, another office visit with Dr. Claudine. Director of Elder Services, $78,000 a year. I nearly declined. "Claudine, I said I'm 80 years old." "Exactly why it should be you," she said. "No one here knows this population the way you do." I took the position. By August, Silver Bridges operated across 7 cities, Elgin-Champaign, Joliet among them. 420 women helped. Chicago Magazine ran me on the cover. The man who rebuilt himself. The issue sat in my desk drawer not out of pride, though I felt it, but because I still couldn't entirely believe it. 4 years prior, I'd been face down in the snow on a Wicker Park sidewalk. Now, this. Early November, Dr. Claudine walked into my office with an envelope. "This came for you, a Chicago law firm's return address. Inside a letter. Dear Mr. Whitmore, my name is Harriet Voss. I represent Diane Whitmore Fenn. At her request, I am reaching out on her behalf. She recognizes you may prefer not to hear from her directly. Nonetheless, she wishes you to have the following. She and Randall Fenn divorced in 2011. She has been in therapy for 2 years. In 2012, she directed an anonymous donation of $75,000 to Harbor Light. She carries deep regret over what occurred in February 2010. If you are open to it, she would welcome a chance to apologize in person. Please reach out through my office if you choose to respond. Sincerely, Harriet Voss, Esquire." 3 readings, $75,000, no name attached. She'd been reaching towards something without once asking to be recognized for it. Dr. Claudine hovered in the doorway. "What will you do?" I smoothed the fold in the letter. "I don't know. Do you want to see her?" Lily came to me first, that last image, arms outstretched, screaming while Randall pulled her from the room. Then Diane's face, that silence. Then the $75,000, the divorce, 2 years in therapy. She was working at something. But was I anywhere close to ready? Maybe I said, "Not yet, though." Dr. Claudine nodded. "Take whatever time you need." The letter joined the magazine in the drawer. 2 documents, one marking where I'd collapsed, one marking how far I'd walked since. I wasn't certain which one told the more important story. The weeks after that, Diane circled my thoughts constantly. 5 years under the same roof together. The parts that had been genuinely good mornings with Lily in the kitchen, things I'd fixed around the house Sunday dinners, and then the night it shattered, her silence, her failure or refusal to stand between me and what was coming. Part of me could find understanding in that. Fear control, maybe worse. Part of me still couldn't release it. Late November, one quiet evening in my room, I wrote, not to Diane, to myself. Gerald went down on the page first, the father, the grandfather, the man who trusted openly and paid for it. Then Leonard the director, the one drawing bridges and watching them rise. And I wrote, you don't have to forgive her to move forward. You don't have to forget to be whole. You survived, you rebuilt. That's enough. Into the drawer with the rest. By November of 2013, I had a real life beneath me. The gala invitation appeared in early December, thick cream envelope, gold lettering. Annual non-profit gala, February 16, 2014. The Fairmont Chicago Millennium Park. Harbor Light named as an honoree. The director of Elder Services invited to address the room. I took it straight to Dr. Claudine's office. I can't do this. She looked up. Can't do what? Stand up and speak. In front of how many? Around 250. My stomach turned over. I'm no good in front of a crowd. Leonard, she said, you address residents every single morning. You've presented to funders. The Tribune interviewed you. She came around her desk. You don't have to be perfect, just honest. For 2 weeks I worked on that speech. I wrote about Harbor Light, about the 30 rooms and the community we'd shaped together, about giving people hope, not just a roof over their heads. I wrote about Silver Bridges, about 420 women, about Winifred landing her first job in 6 years, about women finding their way back to family. It was solid, safe, professional, but hollow somehow. A few days before Christmas, Claudine knocked on my door. How's the speech coming? It's finished? Can I hear it? I read it aloud. 5 minutes. When I stopped, she said nothing for a moment. It's good, Leonard, but you're not in it. What do you mean you're talking about Harbor Light and Silver Bridges, but not what brought you here? Not your own story. My story isn't what matters here. Leonard, she leaned toward me. You survived elder abuse, were thrown out in a blizzard, nearly died, and built an entire life back up from nothing. That carries weight. I don't want people feeling sorry for me. It's not pity, it's hope. You're proof that starting over is possible. Even at 77, even after losing everything. I sat with that for 3 weeks. Every time I picked up the speech, her voice came back. You're not in it. She was right. Harbor Light had saved my life. If I couldn't tell people why this work meant something to me personally, what was any of it for? By mid-January, I started from scratch. I rewrote everything. This time I opened with February 13th, 2010. The blizzard, the cold, the hypothermia. No names, just my son-in-law and my daughter. I talked about being Gerald, becoming Leonard, about Officer Haddon, about Dr. Claudine, about Harbor Light, giving me another chance. Then Silver Bridges turning pain into something useful, helping 420 women, because I knew in my bones what it felt like to have nowhere left to go. First draft ran 11 pages. I cut it to 7, then 5. Better. Late January, I asked Arlene to sit and listen. We settled in the common room after dinner. I read the whole thing straight through. When I finished, she was crying. Arlene wiped her eyes. That was beautiful, Leonard. This is going to change lives. That night, sleep wouldn't come. I kept turning the gala over in my mind, the stage, the room, 250 people telling my story out loud. And then I thought about Diane. I'd been setting her letters aside for months. The lawyer, the $75,000 donation, all of it. But I knew she worked in marketing, event organizing, corporate events, non-profit galas. What if she was connected to this one? The next morning, I asked Claudine, who's putting together the gala? A company called Pinnacle Events. Why? I looked them up. There it was, right on their website. Diane Whitmore, Fenn Senior Marketing Manager. My daughter was organizing the very gala where I'd be speaking, and she wouldn't have any idea. The program listed me as Leonard Whitmore, Director of Elder Services. She didn't know my middle name. She'd never called me Leonard. To her, I was Gerald, and Gerald was gone. An idea took shape, dangerous, maybe foolish. What if I had her invited? Not directly, anonymously. A last-minute name on the guest list. She'd come, she'd see the program, Leonard Whitmore. She wouldn't know it was me. Not until I walked onto that stage. Then she'd see that I was alive, healthy, that I'd built something real, that I hadn't needed her to rescue me because I'd rescued myself. I brought it to Dr. Claudine. Are you sure about this? No. But I think I have to do it. Why? Because I need closure, and maybe she does too. Claudine nodded slowly. Okay. I'll make sure she receives an invitation. The next 3 weeks ran together in a blur. I practiced every night in my room, in front of the mirror out loud. 7 minutes. Right on the mark. Arlene listened twice more, cried both times. Curtis came by to visit. I told him about the gala. He said he'd be there. Front row. Dr. Claudine arranged a suit navy blue. It fit perfectly. Everything was ready. Everything except me. The morning of February 16th, I was awake at 5:00 a.m. Sleep wasn't coming back. I sat at my desk and read through the speech one final time. My name is Leonard Whitmore, but 4 years ago, I was known as Gerald. I shut my eyes, pulled in a long breath. In 12 hours, I'd be standing on a stage at the Fairmont Chicago Millennium Park in front of 250 people, including my daughter, who had no idea I was coming, who had no idea Leonard Whitmore was Gerald, who had no idea her father had made it out alive. I opened my eyes. The speech sat there on the desk. 5 pages, 7 minutes. 4 years of living pressed down into words. I folded it and slipped it into my jacket pocket. 3 weeks of preparation, and then the night was there. The ballroom at the Fairmont Chicago Millennium Park was breathtaking. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, pouring warm golden light across the room. Round tables in white linen filled the space, each one set with candles and small flower arrangements. A string quartet played Handel in the corner, while 250 guests in evening wear moved through the room with champagne glasses in hand. I stood near the entrance, pulling at my tie. The navy blue suit felt wrong on me. Too tight, too formal, like I'd climbed into somebody else's clothes. Curtis had picked it out. You're the guest of honor, Leonard. You can't show up in khakis. But I felt like an imposter. Dr. Claudine appeared at my side. You look great. I feel like I'm about to be sick. She smiled. That means it matters to you. Come on, our table's up front. She steered me through the crowd. I caught pieces of conversations, fundraising targets board, elections grant deadlines. This was their world, not mine. We reached a table close to the stage. Arlene was already seated in a burgundy dress I'd never seen on her before. She looked elegant, radiant. She rose and pulled me into a hug. You clean up nicely. Thanks, I said, not entirely convinced it was true. Curtis arrived a few minutes later with his wife Bet. He squeezed my shoulder. Ready. No. Good. At 7:10, the lights went down. A tall man in his 40s stepped onto the stage, polished, confident. Good evening, my name is Alden Kerrigan, and I'm honored to serve as your host tonight. Applause rolled through the room. We're here tonight to celebrate 5 nonprofit organizations transforming lives across Greater Chicago, organizations that offer hope, dignity, and community. He went through the list: food banks, youth mentorship, domestic violence shelters, mental health services. Then, Harbor Light, dedicated to helping older adults experiencing homelessness rebuild their lives with dignity and purpose. The applause sounded far away. My heart was hammering too hard to hear much else. To tell us more, Alden went on, please welcome my colleague Diane Whitmore Fenn. The room tilted. Diane. I'd known she worked for Pinnacle Events. I'd known she might be in the audience. I had not expected to see her walk onto that stage. She stepped into the spotlight, black dress, simple, elegant, but thinner than I remembered. Her cheekbones sharper. Dark circles settled beneath her eyes. She looked worn down. She smiled the way you do when it's required as she reached the microphone. Good evening. Her voice was steady and practiced, but I could hear the effort underneath it. Harbor Light was founded in 1999 to address a growing crisis older adults, especially women, experiencing homelessness for the first time. Women who had worked entire lifetimes, raised families, given back to their communities, only to lose everything to illness, divorce, or hardship. She paused. In 2010, Harbor Light launched Silver Bridges, a comprehensive support program for women over 50, job training, healthcare navigation, mental health services, and housing assistance. In 3 years, Silver Bridges has helped over 400 women rebuild their lives. Applause. Diane glanced back down at her card. Tonight, we honor the man who created Silver Bridges. A man who understands this work not only professionally, but personally. Please welcome Mr. Leonard Whitmore, Director of Elder Services at Harbor Light. The room erupted. I didn't move. Claudine leaned close. Leonard, go. I stood. My legs felt like they belonged to someone else. I walked toward the stage, each step heavier than the one before. 5 stairs, I climbed them. The lights hit me full in the face. I was 15 feet from Diane. She turned toward me. For just a heartbeat, she looked at me, the way a stranger would, polite, professional. Then it landed. Her eyes went wide as they moved across my face, the scar above my eyebrow from the night I hit the snow, the slight limp that decades of carpentry had left behind. Her mouth came open. No sound followed. The microphone slipped from her hand. It struck the stage with a sharp clang. The ballroom froze. 250 people went completely silent. Alden stepped forward quickly. "Diane, are you okay?" She didn't answer. Tears ran down her face as she stood staring at me, one hand pressed over her mouth. "Do you need to sit down?" he asked. She gave a faint nod. He guided her toward the stairs. She kept looking back at me, pale, shaken. Every person in that room watched her go. Then they all looked at me. I stood alone at the podium, a sea of faces caught between confusion and worry. The quartet had gone quiet. The silence was absolute. I searched the room. Claudine sat perfectly still, steady as stone. Arlene had tears on her face, but was smiling, nodding me forward. Curtis caught my eye and gave one small, quiet nod. Then I found Diane. She stood at the edge of the room, one hand braced against a pillar. Alden hovered close beside her, concerned, but she wasn't looking at him. She was looking at me. Mascara smudged, breathing unsteady, but looking at me for the first time in 4 years. I turned back to the microphone and picked it up. Feedback shrieked briefly. I flinched, then silence. I drew a breath and I began. "My name is Leonard Whitmore." I paused. 250 faces looking back at me. But 4 years ago, I was known as Gerald. Another pause. Unease moved through the room like a current. 4 years ago, I vanished. Not by choice, because someone needed me gone. The silence deepened. The past. 1962. I met Evelyn at a diner in Evanston. We talked for 3 hours. Married in 74. Had a daughter in 76. Diane. I didn't look at her yet. Evelyn passed away in 2004. After 42 years together, I didn't know how to be a person without her. My voice cracked. In 2005, I sold our Lincoln Park home, gave my daughter and her husband $175,000 toward a bigger house in Wicker Park. I moved in with them. I let those numbers settle in the room. For 4 years, I lived with Diane, her husband Randall, and my granddaughter Lily. I repaired things around the house, played with Lily, made dinner, tried to pull my weight. Pause. But Randall was carrying a secret. $77,000 in gambling debts. Joliet, Las Vegas, and he needed cash fast. The room went still. In December 2009, $8,500 vanished from my room, money from my pension. I kept it tucked in my Bible. Someone gasped. Randall accused me of misplacing it, of being muddled. 77 years old. "Maybe your memory isn't what it used to be, Gerald." I mimicked his voice. Then I found out the truth. Randall had taken out a life insurance policy on me. $400,000. January 2010, 1 month before he put me out. Louder gasps. He wasn't just after my savings. He wanted me dead. The night that changed everything. February 13th, 2010. 8:37 p.m. Randall called me downstairs, showed me fabricated text messages, photos of cash hidden in my closet that I had never seen before. My hands tightened on the podium. He told Diane I had stolen from them. She stood there and said nothing. When I begged her to believe me, not a word came out of her. A sob from the side of the stage. Randall gave me 10 minutes to pack and leave. 15 degrees outside, a blizzard. I was 77. I had $43 in my wallet, a spring jacket, no hat, no gloves. The room went rigid and my daughter stood and watched as her husband drove me out into the snow to die. My voice broke. Lily screamed, "Grandpa, please stay!" Randall pulled her back inside. The door slammed shut. Long pause. Then I walked into that blizzard. Alone at 77. Nowhere to go. I thought, this is how Gerald Whitmore dies. The rescue. But I didn't die. I looked up. At 10:30 p.m., Chicago police officer Curtis Haddon found me half-frozen, hypothermic, collapsed at a bus stop. I pointed to the front row. Curtis stood. People clapped. Officer Haddon saved my life. Stroger Hospital. 3 days hospitalized. 8 stitches in my forehead. Frostbite across my ears and fingers. Curtis sat. When I came around, Dr. Claudine Overbeck came to see me. She ran Harbor Light, a shelter for older adults facing homelessness. She offered me a bed, a chance, a future. I looked at Claudine. Tears ran down her face. She had also offered me a choice. Stay, Gerald Whitmore, the man who had been betrayed, discarded, left to freeze, or become someone new. The transformation. February 21st, 2010. I chose a new name. Leonard Whitmore, my middle name. I began again. I stood a little straighter. I worked as a community health worker, helped residents navigate insurance, drove them to their appointments, sat with them, and heard their stories. March 2010, Randall was arrested. Fraud, elder abuse, attempted manslaughter, 30 years. Murmurs moved through the crowd. I kept working. In 2010, I started Silver Bridges to help women over 50 experiencing homelessness. Not just shelter job training, healthcare, mental health support, childcare, resume, help, everything a person needs to put a life back together. My voice grew stronger. Our first year, 65 women. End of 2012, 205. Today, Silver Bridges operates in 7 Illinois cities. Over 420 women helped. Applause began to build. I raised my hand. Not me. We, Claudine, Arlene, Curtis. Winifred, every Harbor Light resident, every donor, every volunteer. We built this together. The message. Why am I telling you all of this tonight? I looked directly at Diane. Her face was wet with tears. Because if you have been betrayed, discarded, told, you're too old, too broken, too far gone, you're not. My voice steadied. You can start over. Become someone new. Build a life that means something. At 77, at 80, at any age, pause. And to those who threw you away, you don't need their forgiveness. You don't need their apology. You only need to survive and then build something better. The ending. 4 years ago, Gerald Whitmore disappeared into a blizzard. He was meant to die alone, forgotten. I smiled. But he didn't die. He became Leonard Whitmore, Director of Elder Services, founder of Silver Bridges. Tonight, standing in front of you, I am proof it is never too late. To begin again, to grow into who you were, always meant to be. To turn the worst thing that ever happened to you into your purpose. I looked across the audience, then to Diane, then to Curtis, Claudine, and Arlene. Thank you for giving me a second chance, for believing an old man found frozen at a bus stop could become something more. This is only the beginning. I stepped back for 3 seconds. Silence. Then Curtis stood, then Claudine, then Arlene, then the entire front row, then the whole room. 250 people on their feet, clapping, crying, shouting, and from the side of the stage, a broken voice. Dad, Diane. I closed my eyes. Peace. I stepped away from the microphone. My legs shook, my hands trembled, but I was still standing. 7:55 p.m. The applause held for 3 minutes. I came down the stage steps. Claudine rushed over and pulled me into a tight embrace. Curtis shook my hand, his grip firm and steady. Arlene dabbed her eyes and whispered, "You did it." But I wasn't looking at them. I was looking at Diane. 8:00 p.m. She stood 10 ft away. Black dress, slight frame, red eyes. She took 1 step toward me, then stopped. "Dad," she whispered. Her voice barely rose above the fading applause. "Dad." I looked at her, really looked at her. 4 years. 4 years since that night. I said nothing. She took another step. "I'm so sorry. I should have..." I raised my hand. Not in anger, not coldly, just not ready. Diane, my voice was quiet. "Not yet." Her face crumpled, but she gave a small nod and held her ground. The room had grown quieter. People were beginning to sit again. Conversations resumed in low murmurs. Someone laughed nervously, and then, boom, the back doors of the ballroom burst open. 8:05 p.m. Every head swung around. A man stood in the doorway, disheveled, unshaven, red-rimmed eyes, baggy jeans, a rumpled jacket. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. Randall Fenn. The room went silent. Leonard Whitmore. His voice rang through the ballroom, raw, furious. "You destroyed my life." Gasps erupted. Chairs scraped the floor. Someone screamed. Claudine grabbed my arm. "Leonard, get back." But I didn't move. Randall came charging down the center aisle. Security near the entrance began moving too slow. He was fast and desperate. 30 years. I got 30 years because of you. 50 ft away, then 30. Curtis stepped in front of me. "Sir, you need to stop right there." Randall didn't slow down. 8:06 p.m. He swung. His fist caught Curtis across the jaw. Curtis staggered back into a chair and went down hard. The crowd screamed. Randall kept coming. 20 FT 1510. He stopped directly in front of me, close enough that I caught the stale alcohol on his breath. Could see the broken vessels in his eyes. You were supposed to die in that blizzard. His voice was shaking. I set the whole thing up. The texts, the cash, the insurance policy, $400,000. He was shouting now, spitting, his hands balled into fists. You were supposed to freeze to death out there alone, and no one would ever have known. But you lived. You became this. He flung his arm toward the stage, toward the banner that read Harbor Light 15th Anniversary Gala. And you ruined me. I looked at him. This man who had thrown me out into the cold, who had wanted me dead, and I felt nothing. Calm down, Randall, I said quietly. You ruined yourself. His face twisted. 8:07 p.m. Dad, stop. Diane ran forward and stepped between us, arms out, hands shaking. Randall, please just go, please. He looked at her, and for just a moment, something shifted behind his eyes. Pain, regret, rage. Then he shoved her hard. Diane fell back and hit the floor. Her head cracked against a chair leg. I moved without thinking, dropped to my knees beside her. Diane. Randall lunged at me, but he never got there. 8:08 p.m. 4 police officers closed in on him from behind. They seized his arms and forced him down. He fought, kicked, screamed, "Get off me." He stole my life. I had it all arranged. The insurance, the texts, the cash planted in his closet. I planted all of it. Every person in that ballroom heard him. 250 witnesses. Randall Fenn confessing to everything. $400,000. It was mine. He was supposed to die. I needed that money. $77,000 in debt. Joliet, Las Vegas. It was all mine. His voice collapsed into sobs. I set it all up. The fake texts, the missing cash, the blizzard, all of it. He was supposed to vanish, and then the money would be mine, and I'd finally be free. The officers forced him onto his stomach and cuffed his hands behind his back. 8:10 p.m. Detective Calvin Reeve moved through the crowd, composed, unhurried, professional. I knew his face from 4 years back. He crouched beside Randall. Randall Fenn, you're under arrest for assault and violating a restraining order. He glanced over at me. About 6 additional charges will be added based on what you just confessed. You have the right to remain silent. Randall sobbed into the carpet. I lost everything. My wife, my daughter, 30 years, all of it. Calvin looked up at me. You all right, Mr. Whitmore? I nodded. Good. We'll need your statement, but that can wait until tomorrow. 2 officers pulled Randall to his feet. His face was wet, shattered. As they steered him past me, he turned and looked at me one final time. I'm sorry, he whispered. I gave him nothing back. They let him out. 8:15 p.m. The ballroom went still. 250 people frozen in place. Diane sat on the floor beside me, tears pouring down her face. She looked up at me and choked out the words. I should have stopped him that night. I should have. Her voice broke apart. She dropped to her knees, hands pressed together. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Please, please forgive me. I looked down at her, my daughter who had stood there without a word, while her husband flung me into a blizzard to die. I couldn't name what I felt. The crowd held its breath waiting. Dr. Claudine Overbeck stood just behind me. Officer Curtis Haddon was back on his feet, cradling his jaw. Arlene Croft had her hand pressed over her mouth. Every eye in the room was on us. Diane sobbed, broken, desperate, and I had no idea what to say. The silence stretched on. 10 seconds, 20, 30, and then something shifted, something I hadn't seen coming. She stood up. Diane wiped her face with the back of her hand. Mascara had carved dark lines down her cheeks, her eyes red and swollen. Dad, she said quietly, can we talk, just the 2 of us? The ballroom didn't make a sound. 250 people watching. I looked at her then, back at Claudine. Claudine gave a small nod. All right, I said, but not in here. 8:35 p.m. Curtis offered to come along. I shook my head. I'll be fine. Diane led me through a side door, down a corridor of mirrors and gold trim, past stunned hotel staff who didn't know where to look. We walked without speaking. 8:40 p.m. The courtyard was small and hushed. String lights hung overhead. A fountain murmured somewhere close. Stone benches rested beneath ivy-draped trellises. February cold cut through the air. My breath came out in small clouds. Diane settled onto one bench. I took another 5 feet away. For a long moment, neither of us said anything. "I need to tell you something," she whispered. "Something I should have said 4 years ago." I waited. Randall hit me. October 2009. I was pregnant with our second child. I lost the baby 2 days later. She kept her eyes on the fountain. He blamed me, said I was too emotional, that it was my fault, and I believed him. The water burbled softly. It got worse. He drank scream through things. Once he grabbed my wrist so hard the bruise lasted for weeks. I told everyone I'd fallen. My hands tightened against my knees. By December, I was living in fear. But I stayed for Lily. I thought if I kept quiet, if I didn't set him off, he'd stop. She finally lifted her eyes to mine. "Then you came to live with us. Things got better. Randall behaved himself. You fixed things. You cooked. You made Lily laugh. You made that house feel like somewhere safe." Tears ran freely now. "But he resented you for it. Said you thought you were perfect. Always the hero. He was jealous of you. Of a 77-year-old man." She wiped her nose. "When the $8,500 went missing, I knew it wasn't you. You kept your money tucked in your Bible. You told me that after Mom died." My throat tightened. "But Randall showed me texts, photos, cash he said he'd found in your closet. He told me if I stood up for you, he'd take Lily and disappear, that I'd never see her again." She sobbed. "So that night, February 13th, and when he accused you, when he threw you out, I said nothing. I was scared. I was a coward." She looked at me desperate. "I've carried that every single day, knowing I let my father walk into a blizzard to die. Knowing I picked my own fear over your life." Silence settled over the courtyard. "I was angry for 3 years," I said quietly. "I woke up at Harbor Light every morning, thinking about you standing there, silent. I felt rage." Her face crumpled. "I wanted to hate you, but hatred takes energy, and I needed every bit of that energy to rebuild myself." I held her gaze. "So I let it go slowly, week by week. I stopped rehearsing the things I'd say if I ever saw you again. I just released you." She cried openly. "And tonight," I went on, "when I saw you on that stage, I felt nothing. No anger, no joy, just recognition. That's my daughter. The woman who stayed silent while her husband tried to end my life." She flinched. "But also the woman who donated $75,000 to Harbor Light anonymously." Claudine told me. I put it together. Diane stared at me, stunned. "You've been trying to make it right in your own way for 3 years." She nodded, unable to find words. I got up, crossed to her bench, and sat beside her, still a foot between us. "I forgive you, Diane." She broke sobbing into her palms. "But I can't forget. Not yet. Maybe not ever. That night changed everything. It killed Gerald Whitmore. I can't bring him back." She nodded through her tears. We sat without speaking. Then she said something. "Lily asks about you every week. She's 10. She still sleeps with Mr. Buttons, the rabbit you gave her." My chest tightened. "She thinks you're dead. I told her you'd moved to California. I couldn't bring myself to tell her the truth." She looked at me. "Can I tell her you're alive? Please, she doesn't have to see you." I thought of Lily screaming as Randall dragged her away. "Yes," I said. "You can tell her I'm alive, that I'm okay, that I think about her." Diane managed a faint smile. "And maybe someday," I added, "we can talk about me meeting her, but not yet." "Of course, thank you." She squeezed my hand once, then let go. 9:00 p.m. We sat quietly for a while. Then she rose. "Thank you, Dad. I know I don't deserve this." I stood as well. "Nobody deserves forgiveness," I said. "That's why it's called grace." She smiled a sad small smile and made her way back toward the ballroom. I watched until she was gone. I felt lighter. Not healed, not whole, but lighter. It was a beginning. Fragile, uncertain, but a beginning. I woke the next morning in my room, at Harbor Light Room, 9, same bed, same blue blanket, same window, looking out over the park, but my phone was already alive with noise. 43 missed calls, 112 text messages, 207 unread emails. I sat up and stared at the screen. The first text was from Curtis Leonard. "Check the news. You're everywhere." I opened my browser and found it in seconds. Someone at the gala had recorded my entire speech, all 20 minutes, from "My name is Leonard Whitmore" to the standing ovation, and uploaded it to TikTok sometime after midnight with a caption that made my stomach clench. 77-year-old man thrown into a blizzard by his son-in-law, becomes director helping 420 women rebuild their lives. His daughter stood silent. His son-in-law wanted him dead. This is the most powerful speech I've ever heard. By morning, the video had 50,000 views. By noon Wednesday, it was at 200,000. By evening, 500,000. Comments poured in faster than I could follow them. I'm sobbing. This man is a hero. Where is the daughter now? She owes him an apology. 40 years for Randall. Not enough? I want to donate to Harbor Light. Where do I send money? Someone built a Facebook page called Justice for Leonard Whitmore. Another person launched a change.org petition demanding Randall's sentence be extended to life. The video jumped to Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. By Thursday morning, more than 2 million people had watched my story. CNN called. NBC called. Good Morning, America wanted an interview. The Chicago Tribune asked for a profile. NPR emailed about my path from abandonment to advocacy. I sat in Claudine's office completely overwhelmed. "Gerald, this is unprecedented," she said, scrolling through her laptop. "Our donation page has crashed twice. We've taken in over $350,000 in 48 hours. I stared at her. $300,000 and it's still coming in. $10 here, $50 there. Someone gave $5,000 with a note that said, "For Gerald Whitmore who didn't die in the snow." My throat closed. Curtis stopped by at lunch, his jaw still bruised from Randall's punch. "You're a celebrity now. People are calling you the Blizzard Survivor. There's a hashtag trending." "I didn't do this to be famous," I said. "I know," he replied, "but people needed to hear it." That afternoon, Arlene brought me lunch tears tracking down her face. A woman in Ohio launched her own Silver Bridges program this morning. She emailed Claudine, said you inspired her. I couldn't take it in. By Friday, donations had reached $500 to $1, 500,000. Claudine called an emergency staff meeting. 20 people packed into the conference room. "This changes everything," she said, her voice unsteady. "We can open 2 more locations, bring on more staff, double what we can offer." The room burst into cheers, but my mind slipped back 4 years to the blizzard. $43 in my wallet. No phone, no plan. If Curtis hadn't found me, I would have died in that snow. That afternoon, a letter arrived on thick cream paper bearing an official seal. Claudine read it aloud. "Dear Mr. Whitmore, your story of resilience and service is an inspiration to the Commonwealth. You have transformed personal tragedy into public good, the highest form of citizenship. With gratitude, Governor Gwendolyn Parrish." I sat there unable to move. That evening, Detective Calvin Reeve called. "Randall was sentenced today," he said. "The assault at the gala, the restraining order violation, and his public confession. The judge tacked on 10 years. My hand tightened around the phone. Total sentence 40 years. With time served, he'll be eligible for parole in 2024. He'll be 76. I did the numbers. "Good," I said quietly. "You holding up with all this attention?" Calvin asked. "I don't know," I said. "But if it helps someone else out there, maybe it's worth it." The emails from Diane started the day the video went viral. "Dad, I saw it. I'm so proud of you. I'm so sorry. Please can we talk?" The following day, Lily saw it too. "She knows you're alive. She cried for an hour. She wants to see you. Then I lost my job. The firm let me go because of all the attention around Randall. I'm applying everywhere. I don't blame them. And I'm in therapy now. Twice a week. I know I can't undo any of it, but I'm trying. For Lily, for myself, for you." I read every email. I didn't write back, not yet. "You don't owe her anything," Claudine said softly one evening. "I know," I replied, "but she's trying. That matters, doesn't it?" I thought about Diane that night, standing silent, terrified. I thought about the $75,000 she'd given anonymously. "Yeah," I said, "it does." By the end of the week, the video had hit 5 million views. Harbor Light had raised over $500,000. Randall would spend decades behind bars. Diane kept writing slowly, steadily, and I kept reading. Not ready to forgive, not ready to swing the door back open, but listening. The video had shifted everything. Harbor Light could grow statewide. Silver Bridges could reach hundreds more women. Randall was gone, and my daughter was making the effort. I didn't know what was coming, but for the first time in 4 years, I sensed there might be room for something beyond survival. Maybe there was space for healing. The email sat in my drafts for 3 days before I finally pressed send. "Diane, I'm willing to meet. Coffee somewhere public. She replied within 5 minutes. Thank you, Dad. Wednesday 2, 0 p.m., Birch and Brew, Wicker Park. 3 days later, I walked in. She was already seated, thinner, hair shorter, dark circles beneath her eyes. When she spotted me, she stood. We both hesitated. Hi, Dad. Hi. We sat. 10 minutes of silence, coffee going cold. Finally, she spoke. I'm in a one-bedroom in Pilsen. Lily and I share it. I work part-time at a bookstore, still sending out applications for marketing jobs, but she trailed off. Nobody wants to hire me. I'm sorry. She looked up, startled. You're apologizing to me for what you're going through. Tears filled her eyes. I let him throw you out. You were terrified, abused, protecting Lily. I understand that now. We talked for 2 hours. Therapy, panic attacks. Lily asking about me every night. Randall's debts, credit cards, loans she'd never known about. I'm going to pay you back, she said. The $75,000. No, that money helped people. That's exactly where it belongs. When we left, we shook hands. Just a handshake, but it was something. A week after that, we walked Millennium Park together. Trees, bare ground, lightly dusted with snow. Families with strollers, dogs cutting loose. I think about Mom a lot, Diane said suddenly. What she'd make of all this. I drew a slow breath. She'd be heartbroken, but she'd forgive you. That's the kind of person she was. Diane's voice broke. Would she be proud of you? I thought of Evelyn, our 42 years together, the way she believed people were capable of change. Yeah, I think she would. She'd be proud of you, Dad, Diane said, for surviving, for building something real, for becoming Gerald Whitmore. I stopped walking. She said Mom always used to say you were stronger than you realized. My throat tightened. For the first time, Evelyn's presence didn't bring pain with it. 2 weeks before Christmas, Diane called. Lily wants to see you. My heart stopped. Is she ready? She's been ready for 4 years. We met on December 28th at a park near Diane's apartment. I arrived early, hands trembling. Then I saw them, Diane crossing the grass, and beside her, a girl, taller now, dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, pink jacket. Lily, 9 years old, 4 years since that night. Diane pointed toward me. Lily's eyes went wide. Then she ran full speed. She slammed into me, arms locked around my waist, face pressed into my coat. I went still, then wrapped my arms around her, and I cried, for the first time in 4 years. Lily pulled back and looked up at me with Evelyn's eyes. I thought you were gone. Mom said California, but then the video. I knew you were alive. I'm here, I whispered. I'm right here. We found a bench and sat down. Lily talked without stopping. School, friends. Mr. Button still on her bed every single night. Do you remember the birdhouse we built? She asked. I do. Can we do that again? Can you teach me more? I looked over at Diane. She nodded through tears. Yeah, we can do that. Lily unfolded a piece of paper, a crayon drawing. 3 stick figures. Tall with gray hair, me, medium with long hair, Diane, small with a ponytail. Lily? No one else? That's our family, just us 3? What about your dad? Her face went hard. He's not my family anymore. He hurt you. He hurt Mom. I folded the drawing carefully and slipped it in my pocket. Thank you, Lily. We spent 2 hours together drawing pictures, building little towers out of sticks, talking about everything and nothing in particular. When it was time to go, Lily hugged me. Next week? Yeah, next week. By January, we had a real routine. Every Sunday. The park, the field museum, long walks around Chicago. I taught Lily carpentry, how to hammer measure sand. She had a gift for it. Quick hands, patient mind. Diane joined us sometimes. Other times she gave us space. It wasn't perfect. Silences still landed heavy. There were moments I'd look at Diane and the memory would surface. Moments when Lily mentioned something and I'd feel the full weight of all I'd missed. But we were showing up, and that was enough. Fragile like new wood, not yet sealed, but real. The letter came in late January. Thick cream paper. Official seal. Dear Mr. Whitmore, you have been selected to receive the Governor's Medal of Service, the Commonwealth's highest civilian honor. Ceremony February 15th, 2014, Illinois State Capitol. I called Claudine. Did you know about this? She laughed. I wrote the nomination. The morning of February 15th, I stood in my room, adjusting my tie. Navy suit, same one from the gala. Arlene knocked. Ready, Mr. Medal winner? No. Oh, good. That means you're still human. The Illinois state capitol rose above Lincoln Park, its golden dome catching the light. 300 people filled the grand staircase hall. Curtis in dress uniform, Claudine in burgundy, Arlene Winifred Harbor, light residents in the third row, Diane and Lily just behind them. Lily waved, I waved back. Governor Gwendolyn Parrish stepped to the podium at 2:00. Today we honor a man whose story reflects the very best of Illinois. 4 years ago, Gerald Whitmore was 77, betrayed, thrown into a blizzard, left to die. But Officer Haddon found him, Dr. Overbeck gave him shelter, and Gerald chose to build something extraordinary. She looked at me directly. Since 2010, he has served as Director of Elder Services at Harbor Light, founded Silver Bridges, helped over 420 women, expanded to 7 cities, and inspired millions. The Governor's Medal of Service honors exceptional courage and commitment. Today, I present it to Gerald Whitmore. Applause broke like a wave. Everyone rose. I walked to the podium. She settled the medal around my neck, heavy bronze blue ribbon. The microphone was mine. Thank you, Governor. But this medal isn't mine alone. It belongs to Officer Curtis Haddon, who pulled me out of the cold. To Dr. Claudine Overbeck, who saw something worth saving in a broken old man. To Arlene and every Harbor Light resident who showed me what community really is. I looked at them, all of them crying. It belongs to the 420 women who trusted Silver Bridges, who did the hard work of rebuilding their lives. They are the real heroes. I found Diane and Lily in the crowd, and it belongs to my family. My daughter Diane, who made terrible mistakes but shows up every day to do better. My granddaughter Lily, who reminded me that forgiveness is possible, that families can be put back together. Diane was sobbing. Lily held her hand. 4 years ago, I believed my life was finished. 77 homeless dying in a blizzard. $43, no future. I touched the medal. But here is what I know now. It is never too late. 17 or 77 or 81. Betrayed, abandoned, or broken, you can start over. You can become someone new. You can turn tragedy into purpose. My voice steadied and grew. If you are struggling right now, you are not alone. You can rebuild. I did it at 77, so can you. The room exploded. Standing ovation. Calvin wiping his eyes. Claudine beaming. Lily standing on her chair, clapping with everything she had. After the ceremony, Lily pushed through the crowd and grabbed my hand. Grandpa, can I hold the medal? I lifted it off my neck and settled it around hers. It hung all the way to her waist. This is yours. You keep it. Her eyes went wide. Really? This medal stands for second chances. And you, Lily, are my second chance. She threw her arms around me and held on. Now, who wants pizza? We headed to a little spot in Wicker Park. Blue checkered tablecloths, paper cups. Lily talked without drawing breath. School her science project, building a real birdhouse together with me. Diane smiled, genuinely smiled. When Lily slipped off to the bathroom, Diane reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Thank you for having us there today. You're my family, even after everything. I thought of Evelyn, the 42 years together, the 4 years lost the future I was still building. Yeah, even after everything. That night I sat in my room. The medal hung on the wall beside Lily's drawing. 3 stick figures, a family. This wasn't the life I had once imagined. Not the family I'd known, but it was a family pieced together from forgiveness. From second chances. My name is Gerald Whitmore. I'm 81 years old. Father, grandfather, director, survivor. 4 years ago, my life didn't end out in a blizzard. It began. I'm proof that it is never too late to start over. Never too late to grow into who you were always meant to be. Never too late to turn tragedy into something with purpose. This is my story, and it's only the beginning. And that is where I'll leave you today, not at the beginning of the storm, but on the other side of it, standing in something I never expected to find, again a reason to keep going. I won't pretend it didn't cost me. It cost me 4 years I'll never get back. It cost me mornings. I woke up angry at a silence I couldn't explain, and evenings I sat alone wondering whether the people who let me down would ever understand what they'd taken. But I believe God doesn't waste the hard years. I believe the Lord's timing, even when it looks like abandonment, is quietly building something you couldn't have built for yourself. What came out of that Blizzard Harbor light silver bridges? Lily's drawing Diane, trying none of it would have existed if I hadn't been forced to start over. So here is what I'd want you to take with you from this story. If someone frames you and walks away clean, don't let their lie write your ending. Your next chapter belongs to you. If fear made you silent when someone needed you, it's not too late to show up persistently quietly for as long as it takes. And if you're sitting in your own version of that blizzard right now, lost, cast out, certain it's over, remember that Dad's revenge isn't rage, it's survival. It's building something so real and so good that silence becomes the loudest answer you could give. Father stories like this one don't get told often enough. The men who get back up, who become something new, who find their family again on the other side of betrayal, those stories deserve to be heard. If this one moved you, share it with someone who needs a reminder that starting over is still possible. Leave a comment and tell me what stayed with you. And if you haven't already subscribed to his Hidden Revenge, there are more stories waiting, and I don't want you to miss a single one. Thank you for spending this time with me. I'll see you in the next one.